Urgent, terrible revenge for Kyiv. A swarm of drones struck Moscow. Red Square in flames. Panic and fear in the very heart of Russia. Moscow paralyzed, panic at airports, passengers trapped. Moscow's air defense is breached. Other regions are no better. Oil refineries and power plants destroyed. Cities unfit for living. Darkness and cold have swept across Russia. Meanwhile, Ukraine is armed to the teeth. New missiles are ready to fly. The Kremlin should prepare. On the front line, our defenders have liberated a record amount of Ukrainian land. The balance of power is shifting right now. Let's talk about it. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Drones reached Moscow. A swarm of UAVs shocked the very heart of Russia. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin claimed that 20 drones heading toward the city were allegedly shot down.
An unmanned aerial vehicle flying toward Moscow was shot down by the air defense forces of the Ministry of Defense. Emergency services specialists are working at the site where the debris fell.
Flight restrictions were introduced at all 4 airports in the Moscow region: Domodedovo, Vnukovo, Sheremetyevo, and Zhukovsky, according to Russia's aviation authority.
Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo airports are receiving and dispatching flights in coordination with the relevant authorities due to temporary restrictions on the use of airspace in the areas of these airports. The measures were taken to ensure flight safety.
Unidentified drones also struck Russia's Tatarstan region. One of the key oil pumping stations, Escalating, was hit and a fire broke out on its territory. Through local stations, including infrastructure around Kalykino, oil from Tatarstan and neighboring regions flow into a major pipeline that passes through the Samara region and heads west toward Belarus and further into Eastern and Central Europe. Belgrade was also hit hard. Local air defenses couldn't repel a combined UAV and missile attack. Several projectiles reached their targets. Belgrade Region Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov stated that the city of Belgrade and the surrounding district were subjected to a massive missile strike from Ukraine, resulting in disruptions to electricity, water, and heating supplies.
The city of Belgorod and the Belgorod district were subjected to a massive missile strike by the armed forces of Ukraine. As a result, there is serious damage to energy infrastructure. There are disruptions in electricity, water supply, and heating for residents. We will be able to fully assess the extent of the damage in daylight.
Meanwhile, Telegram channels report that the strike targeted the Frunzenskaya electrical substation near the village of Dragunskaya in the Belgrade district. At the same time, the Pugachevka airfield in Russia's Ural region was struck. Expensive combat helicopters were reportedly reduced to scrap metal. The destroyed Mi-8 helicopter belonged to the 319th Separate Helicopter Regiment stationed in Chernigovka, Primorsky Krai. The Ka-52 helicopter was assigned to the 16th Army Aviation Brigade based in Zernograd, Rostov region. A breakthrough in missile development. Ukrainian engineers have created a ballistic missile, meaning the armed forces of Ukraine would no longer need external authorization to use such weapons against targets inside Russia. The same applies to the Flamingo missile, which has reportedly demonstrated high effectiveness against targets deep behind enemy lines. British engineers have also joined the process. Details ahead.
The Ukrainian missile, which today is deeply feared and respected not only by our enemies, but thanks to its remarkable precision and pinpoint accuracy, along with its low production cost, is even generating a significant amount of concern among Kyiv's international partners. In February 2022, we asked our Western partners to close the airspace over Ukraine. But by February 2026, it is Europe that is asking Ukraine to share its unique experience on how to do this independently.
It's a very simple technology. There's nothing complicated needed here. There are plenty of books written about this, where everything is explained step by step. What's so difficult about it?
As it turns out, modern American and European air defense technologies have a huge drawback: their cost. Even though Western weaponry is technologically unmatched given the current realities of warfare, NATO would only be able to defend against enemy missiles and drones for a few days. The West simply doesn't have enough resources for more than that, since each missile costs tens or even hundreds of times more than the drones it is used to destroy.
Currently, intercepting an Iskander, it costs over $6 million.
And here, Ukraine comes to the West's aid with its unique Flamingo missile.
We want to bring that down to $1 million, $1.5 million, so that intercepting an Iskander would cost that much.
With the help of the FP9 missile?
With the help of the FP7 missile.
The Ukrainian Flamingo is already demonstrating unprecedented effectiveness and accuracy, striking strategic targets in Russia. Developed in record time, the missile has become yet another headache for Putin and his generals. Since the development is entirely domestic, the Ukrainian armed forces do not need permission to strike Flamingo wherever they want or need to. The only problem our developers have to put up with is scaling up production. So far, it has not been possible to produce a sufficient number of missiles per month for the Ukrainian armed forces.
This is strategic weaponry. Unfortunately, strategic weapons cannot be bought or launched today like hotcakes, in the same quantities as FPV drones, so that the effect is clearly seen by every single person, reaching into each and every household. But based on the missions that have been carried out so far, we can see that it fully met the ambitious objectives that we originally set for it.
For now, there are not enough domestic missiles to strike all targets on Russian territory, so our Western partners have to help with this as well. For example, the United Kingdom is developing a new deep strike ballistic missile for Ukraine.
We can categorically state that first and foremost we are talking about a missile that can be quickly scaled up and is a relatively affordable and accessible resource. Since the government of the United Kingdom is specifically emphasizing that this should be a cost-effective solution, that is, it should effectively address the complex requirements and demands of the times, as we see that the armed forces need a substantial and consistent volume of such means, and it simply cannot be too expensive for the budget.
As a result, within the framework of the Nightfall project, Britain announced a competition for the accelerated development of ballistic missiles intended for combat operations under conditions of high threat and strong electromagnetic interference. The modern British missile will be able to launch from various platforms, carry out a series of launches, and leave its position within a matter of minutes. The system will be equipped with a 200-kilogram high explosive warhead, feature high accuracy, and have a range of up to 500 kilometers.
500 kilometers. That completely covers the entire temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine. It also covers a significant portion of the European part of the Russian Federation, and at this depth the enemy positions both its higher-level headquarters from brigade up to divisional, army, and group of forces levels. These are also quite serious logistical hubs. In other words, these are places where fuel and lubricants as well as ammunition depots are concentrated.
In combination with the Ukrainian Flamingo, the British missile could significantly diminish the Kremlin's and personally Putin's desire to continue their campaign. Instead of launching missile strikes on peaceful Ukrainian cities, the bunker dweller will be forced to endlessly defend against Ukrainian armed forces missiles.
The sheer number and the increasing intensity of the operations currently being carried out by our dedicated security forces using advanced strike drones, including those directed against key strategic targets, are effectively wearing down the enemy's air defense forces over time. Furthermore, the powerful combination of ballistic weapons and strike drones can already deliver highly targeted strikes against specific enemy assets that are critically important to their overall operations.
And it will only get worse from here, at least for the Kremlin. Ukrainian developers promise to reach the necessary supply volumes of ballistic weapons for the armed forces of Ukraine by the end of this year, while simultaneously creating more and more types of advanced weaponry.
In 1 year, it's ballistics. In 2 or 3 years, it's the creation of an anti-ballistic air defense shield over all of Europe.
This is for the entirety of the European continent.
Europe has launched joint production of drones and ballistic weapons with Ukraine. Strikes deep into Russia's rare areas demonstrate how effective the development of Ukraine's defense industry has become. New European assistance, expanded domestic manufacturing, and growing panic among Russian forces. We covered all in the next report.
Putin wants the war to continue, which is why strikes on Russia are ongoing. Russia keeps burning, all because Ukraine knows how to respond to aggression. Moreover, Ukraine continues to develop the means with which it delivers retaliatory strikes. As it has become known, Ukraine, together with Germany, has developed a new drone from Quantum System. This is the RAD target drone, which was already demonstrated during the visit of the Ukrainian delegation to the first Ukrainian-German joint production facility.
A target drone is often used to test the capabilities of air defense systems, whether newly developed or to confirm the specifications of existing ones. They are used to conduct exercises and to train new personnel for air defense systems. Again, the newcomers who are taking their seats for the anti-aircraft self-propelled system, or even an anti-aircraft missile system, or an anti-aircraft missile and gun system, ZRPK. They must, for some reason, strike at something, for some reason at a moving target.
The tactical and technical specifications are still being kept secret, but it is known that the drone will be launched from a catapult. And it is equipped with a jet engine that can reach speeds of up to 450 kilometers per hour. And as experts say, it is most likely also capable of carrying a warhead, which already changes the purpose of the drone itself.
First and foremost, this is a target drone. But we have repeatedly seen examples with you where target drones were equipped, including with combat payloads. And they had the capability to be used directly as a strike element. Therefore, I do not rule out that the drone RAD is a drone for multifunctional use. Not only as a target, for example, for domestic production in European countries, specifically Germany and so on. But this versatile system can also be used to mount a highly destructive explosive warhead on it, and then deploy it for tactical military operations accordingly, for delivering strikes at medium distances. That is, this drone is precisely for striking the enemy's mid-rear zone or temporarily occupied territories or the territory of the Russian Federation. It could be 10 kilograms, 20, 30, 50, or even 100. Consequently, any drone target, as a result, will be handled accordingly. In the near future, it could potentially even become a powerful strike drone.
Ukraine continues to develop its technologies and military-industrial complex. And, as has already become known, as many as 10 factories for the production of Ukrainian drones will open in Europe this year. Therefore, we will increasingly see retaliatory strikes against Russia. But it's not just about drones. On January 11th, the British authorities announced their intention to create a powerful ballistic missile, Nighthawk, specifically for Ukraine. The statement from the British government indicates that the new ballistic missile can carry a 200-kilogram warhead and has a range of 500 kilometers. And these are only the initial figures. As stated by the UK Minister for the Armed Forces, London is determined to provide Ukrainians with more weapons.
A safe Europe needs a strong Ukraine. These new British long-range missiles will allow Ukraine to stay in the fight and will make Putin worry.
But the Nighthawk is not the only missile being prepared for delivery to Ukraine. 6 European countries are developing another new cruise missile. Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Poland, and Sweden signed an agreement to develop it. According to Western sources, this project is known as OWE 500+. The price for such a missile will be below market value. Moreover, the new systems are supposed to be intelligent enough to achieve Western objectives without manual control. Who exactly? Whether Ukraine or Russia has the advantage in drone missiles is still hard to say. But what is known is that the Kremlin clearly did not expect such resistance from the Ukrainians, even in the 4th year of the war.
Through our defensive actions, we are simply exhausting the Russian occupation forces at the tactical, operational, and operational tactical levels. Although as of today, even in principle, even since 1925, the Russian Federation has not demonstrated any success at the operational tactical level at all. Even its offensive actions, during the extensive summer military offensive campaign, it failed to provide any clear evidence that the Russian troops were effectively able to achieve their goals. to capture a range of areas across Ukrainian regions that would have allowed them to break through the Ukrainian defenses, cause a collapse of the defense, or achieve some other breakthroughs deep into our defensive lines. No, nothing of the sort. They advanced very slowly through forest belts, fields, and villages that were practically reduced to ashes. Nothing on a global scale. And in principle, Ukraine now holds a dominant position as a country occupying defensive positions.
The exhaustion of the Russians is happening not only at the front but also in the rear. After all, as we have already seen, strikes on Russia's vulnerable points have not stopped. Ukraine is maximizing both the assistance from its partners and its own defense industry. The Flamingo is already destroying the largest ammunition depots in the Russian rear. Ukrainian Flamingos are also striking at training grounds, for example, Kapustin Yar, from which Russia launches Oreshnik. Here's how the Flamingo flies. Oil refineries, factories, and military units are burning. The Ukrainian Sapsan missile system with ballistic missiles has entered mass production and systematic deployment. And here is the range of the Sapsan. Moreover, according to some expert assessments, Sapsan has an advantage in speed over the American attacks. And it can easily strike Moscow. Some sources claim that Ukraine is already using these missiles, but the information about where and how remains classified. Let's not forget about the Storm Shadow either. And HIMARS, which, according to Russian television, are supposedly being destroyed in batches, but somehow not really. HIMARS still keep hitting the power plants. And the Russian panic is most visible on Russian TV. Because even there, they've started talking about how strong the Ukrainians are.
If Ukraine, just imagine for a moment, manages to hold on. After the conflict ends, the Kyiv regime remains in place. This army is preserved. Europe rearms this army, and Ukraine is admitted into the European Union. Believe me, in 5 years, it won't be Germany, France, Italy, Poland, or anyone else running the European Union. It will be Ukraine running things there. Moreover, it will do so fully aware that its Ukrainian army, if it wishes, can march across all of Europe. And no French, German, or any other army will be able to stop it.
The demilitarization that Putin so desperately wanted to achieve in Ukraine has failed spectacularly. Now, strikes on Russian territory have become more frequent and more powerful, because Ukraine knows how to respond to aggression.
Ukrainian defenders have reclaimed 300 square kilometers from occupying forces in the south of the country. The counteroffensive continues. More on the developments, watch now.
The air assault forces of the Ukrainian armed forces have officially launched an offensive. A corresponding statement was published the day before by the Air Assault Forces Command. Thus, in essence, the General Staff dispelled rumors and stated openly Ukraine is moving forward. The main task assigned to the units is to disrupt the occupiers' plans to advance in the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions, as well as to defeat the enemy grouping and push them beyond the borders of Dnipropetrovsk region.
Well, we really can say today that the counterattacking activity of the Ukrainian Defense Forces is currently taking place in the Huliai-Pol direction, in the Stepnohirsk direction, and not only there. It's not just the southern front, far from it. Therefore, it is clear that Ukraine is using the reserve resources we have and the opportunities that have arisen, including by introducing a certain amount of chaos, such as disabling Starlink.
At the same time, a number of military analysts note that the Russian Federation is gradually recovering. Reserves that had been prepared for the spring offensive were redeployed from Moscow to the areas where the Ukrainian armed forces broke through. The occupiers are also partially trying to restore reliable communications on the front line. However, so far neither effort has produced any significant results.
There are several main reasons for the success of the Ukrainian attacks. The shutdown of Starlink resulting in the loss of stable communications for Russian troops, as well as the general exhaustion of Putin's units in this sector of the front after prolonged continuous assaults. In addition, the Ukrainian armed forces took advantage of the weather conditions, the same fog that had previously played into the hands of Russian troops several times.
Another crucial factor in Ukraine's success was the preparedness of Russian troops on the other side of the front line, or more precisely, the almost complete lack thereof.
Well, I'll say it straight, 80% are unprepared troops. These are people they gathered from various places under different pretexts, mobilization, recruitment, and pressure. So accordingly, they are thrown into battle.
It is also worth noting that the reports about the Ukrainian armed forces liberating hundreds of square kilometers of Ukraine have now been officially confirmed by the military. For example, the spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin, stated that more than 300 square kilometers have already been liberated and our troops continue to advance.
Ukrainian forces are counterattacking along a wide front, approximately 30 kilometers from Varvarivka to Ternova-Ternovate. If the entire area along this stretch is cleared of infiltrating Russian soldiers, it would amount to about 300 square kilometers.
The command notes that information about the advance of the Ukrainian armed forces is announced with a delay, so as not to jeopardize operations, as has happened in the past. But even what has already been made public allows for cautious predictions that the successes of the defense forces may help thwart Putin's major spring offensive.
On this point, it can be said that Ukraine, again, I am not getting ahead of myself because the security of the ongoing military operation is paramount, has, in my view, at least for now, managed to make adjustments to the conduct of the Zaporizhzhia-Orikhiv offensive operation of the Russian Federation. And here, indeed, we should pause for a moment.
As has already been noted, alongside the advancing assault units of the Ukrainian armed forces, the unmanned systems forces are also showing excellent results, continually increasing enemy losses. And the fact that the occupiers are being forced to retreat has also dispelled yet another myth about the Russian Federation, that its people are, after all, not inexhaustible.
If he had them, he would have already thrown in another 500,000 troops, whom he doesn't have in all directions, and would have long since entered Pokrovsk, and would have already taken Huliaipol and Zaporizhzhia, yes, advanced further. But that hasn't happened. In other words, he isn't holding back resources somewhere or hiding them, as many say. So why is that? It's just that they simply don't exist, at least not ready in reality.
By the way, Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky also confirmed in an interview with Le Monde that the war in Ukraine has moved out of a deadlock. According to the General Staff, the front has started to move back, and in recent days there have been up to 50 clashes daily in the Huliaipol and Oleksandrivka directions.
What do you think about the latest events? Share your opinion in the comments, like the video and subscribe to stay informed about the main headlines. See you soon!